This video helps the trainers deliver Photo Voice, a half-day module that's part of the Data for Human Rights training. So we're going to start with this slide, which was presented in the Data for Human Rights Introduction Training 1.1. And you'll want to emphasize that Photo Voice is a data collection method primarily, but it also, the process of doing Photo Voice partially helps us to analyze results as well, to discover and document key messages. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. The reason that we do Photo Voice is to engage participants, prioritize participant issues, and be able to communicate the priorities of participants to a broader audience. And the basic way it works is that the researcher chooses a topic of interest. Participants will take photos that express their perspectives, views, or feelings about this topic. The researcher will print or project all of the photos that are collected. And as a group, participants will select a few of the photos, let's say 10 to 20, for further discussion. And the participants will discuss why they selected their photographs and what makes those photographs meaningful. So this is part of the analysis process where the participants are actually helping us to filter through some of the results. The participants will write a short description of each of the chosen photos, and the entire discussion is recorded and transcribed, so further analysis can be done on the recording. The researcher uses this to understand key issues on the topic. They use the photos, the photo descriptions, and the transcription of the discussion. So let's show two examples of Photo Voice. In this first example, the question was, how does poverty affect women, the participants in this Photo Voice project, were women living on a Native American reservation in the United States? So here's a photograph taken from within a car in terrible weather outside. It's snowing and it's very bad weather. And the participant is saying that this is a picture of her driving out of her reserve to get to financial aid because her power and rent was due, and that her family was in terrible financial situation, and she had to take her kids on the highway in this terrible weather because if she didn't, her power was going to be cut off and she wasn't going to have a place to live with her children. So this is her describing with a photograph and her voice how poverty affects women in her community. And this is, the result here is that women are telling their own stories. Here's another example of Photo Voice where a group was asked, how is trash managed in your neighborhood? And the group together selected these 12 photographs, which document basically a process for improving trash management. And so there's different ways that you can use Photo Voice and different ways the group might present results. Now you're going to pose the question back to your participants, bringing back another slide from the Introduction to Data for Human Rights lecture, and just ask them to reflect on what kind of data is being collected in Photo Voice. What kind of data is being produced? Is it quantitative, numerical data, qualitative, descriptive data, or spatial data? And hopefully it'll be an easy response for folks to identify this as qualitative data, which answers why questions. Now you want to emphasize the importance of choosing participants for a Photo Voice activity. You want the participants to represent important, different perspectives on a topic, and you want to ensure that marginalized perspectives are included. So you want to think about important subgroups in the community that you need to represent as part of your research question. So there's a couple different options for how to form Photo Voice groups. One is to bring together diverse participants into one group and have them share very diverse perspectives. If you think that diversity of perspectives means that some people will feel like they don't have a voice, that there's kind of power differences within the group, you might actually choose to have multiple different groups where each group is a little bit more similar. All the participants in the group are similar, but each group is representing a different perspective, say men versus women, older people versus younger people, etc. So which grouping you decide to do will depend on the research question. And so the basic steps for choosing participants is determine what those important groups or perspectives are to include. If you're having multiple discussion groups or photo voice groups, you want a similar number of people in each group, say 10 to 15 people. And you want to be mindful of how the researcher characteristics might influence what participants are saying when you facilitate those groups. So if you have people of a particular language group, you want to make sure that the facilitator speaks their language. When you present this slide, you're really trying to get participants to think about when they should and should not use photo voice. So I'm going to present 3 questions, and I want participants to discuss whether or not photo voice is an appropriate method to answer this question. The first question is, what makes someone wealthier or poorer in an informal settlement, and why? My particular answer is that photo voice is a good method because it will produce qualitative data which can answer the why question here. That photos can be used to document examples of what participants mean by a wealthier or poorer person in an informal settlement, and their recorded discussions and the descriptions that they put on photos will further explain what they mean by wealth and poverty differences. So the next question is, how many people were displaced during a forced eviction, and where were they displaced to? Is photo voice a good method or not? My answer is no. And the reason is this is partially a what question, that we want to quantify how many people were displaced. So we want a different kind of research method. And it's partially a where question, spatial question of something that we could map. So there are other methods that would be more appropriate to answer this research question. And here is the last question. In what ways has forced eviction impacted you, your household, and your community? It's also a forced eviction question, but it's different than the previous one. And in this case, I think that photo voice would be a good method to use because photo voice is useful for systematically documenting and understanding processes or the impacts of something. The photos can be used to document real examples of what participants mean by the impact of forced eviction. Their recorded quotes and photo descriptions will tell their stories. And these photos and descriptions together can be used not only for research, but also for advocacy. And the last piece is really important. A well-designed group can also be valuable for personal healing. What do I mean by this? Well, people who've experienced human rights abuses or violations, for example, forced eviction, have a trauma. And when you bring people together in a group who've experienced a similar trauma and they feel safe to speak in that group, and they can kind of process what they've been through, they find value in what other people have to say, and they can get support around their trauma. These photo voice groups can actually be really meaningful for the people who participate in them. So here's how you conduct a photo voice study out in the real world, in the field. When you do a full photo voice study, you're going to start by identifying participants before the activity begins. You're going to identify the people you want in particular photo voice groups. And I would normally split this across 2 days at least, and it doesn't have to be back-to-back days. It could be like Monday one week and then Monday the next week. On day 1, you're going to explain to the participants in that group what is photo voice. You're going to obtain their informed consent. You're going to suggest a topic for taking photos. And you're going to ensure that participants have cameras and know how to use them. These can be cameras that you provide, like disposable cameras, or these just might be personal smartphones. Participants will go to the field and take and then submit their photographs. So they can do that in one day, or maybe give them a whole week to do that. But they should share the photographs with you, the facilitator or the trainer here. Now, before the second time that you meet with them, you're going to be printing all of the photos. If you can't print all the photos, be prepared to collect them and project all of them, because you want participants to collectively review all of the photos and select a few for further discussion within their group. So this might be 10 to 20 photographs that they select. 10 or 15 is probably a good number to aim for. In the selected photos, participants will further discuss their views and the processes, priorities, or stories related to them. So they're basically going to tell you the meaning of these photographs and why they were selected. You're going to audio record the entire discussion because that meaning behind the photographs is kind of what you're interested in the most. And then after the event, you can use all of this data that you collected, the photos, the photo descriptions, and the audio recording to really synthesize and understand what were the key issues, why were they the key issues, were these the same issues in different groups, or were they different issues in different groups? So that's where you're going to get your key findings. You want to bring an activity into the classroom, though, before people go to the field and do a full photo voice activity. So here's some practice that you can do in the class. This will probably take about 2 hours. We're going to choose a topic that is not very sensitive, but is also interesting almost anywhere in the world. So the topic is public transportation, and the specific question is, what defines good or bad public transportation? And so here are the steps for setting up this activity. First, you're going to create a WhatsApp chat for everybody who's in the class. You can do this earlier in the class, using the registration forms. So by the time you get to this activity, you're going to split the room into 2 different groups. One group is going to answer the question, what makes good public transportation? And the other group will answer the question about what makes bad public transportation. And you're going to send them out to the field to take photos on their phones. They're going to share all of the photos in the WhatsApp chat. And so you're going to gather all of these photographs, and you won't have time to print them. So I'm just going to recommend that you project all of the photographs in front of them. You might end up with 50 different photographs. What you're going to ask them to do is choose 10 for further discussion. And then if you want, you can audio record this, but this is just for practice, so you don't need to audio record it. And you want, with those 10 photographs, you want the room to write 1 sentence about what the meaning is behind the photo, like why they selected this photo. What is it telling you about good transportation or bad transportation? And this will give everybody a sense of how photo voice works. Here are a few discussion questions to help the people in the class reflect on the training itself and the method, the photo voice method, so that they can be prepared to actually perform a photo voice project out in the real world. While everyone's doing the practical activity in the room, that 2-hour activity, and they've come back from the field and they're discussing, have one of the trainers use the assessment forms that are part of the training instructions to fill out 1 assessment per person and just assess whether or not they went to the field and took relevant photos, and were they present during the class, were they engaged with the activities and discussions. So you just want full, meaningful participation from everybody. If they've done that, they should be able to pass this course with 7, 8 points, no problem. So that's the end of this module. Good luck delivering it. Thank you.